I welcome you to the next the last of the Akkadians, celebrating the legacy of Karl Javorszky. Karl was one of us, so he passed away earlier last month, and we remember him as a valuable member of our FIS community and also of the IAIS Academy. So he was always contributing with very valuable, asking great questions and contributing with very long essays on what he had to talk. So I was honestly talking earlier, leaving the discussion once Carl entered it, because of this huge amount of information he was passing to us. But after that, when reading his papers and his contributions, I was very impressed by his brightness of mind and ideas that he shared. So, very deep, philosophical, mathematical, going also into psychology. And I mean, like everybody else, I was shocked that we miss him so suddenly. And I was very pleased to see that also other members of our communities missed him. So the idea that came to me is that we need to make a talk about his contributions, and I invited the most active members regarding Carl's contributions in earlier discussions, also in our FIS exchange. So I thought that they have also something to share with us about their impression of his presence and his valuable contributions. So this idea was taken by the board and like very good finalizing session of this year 2025. So and both members, Katherine, Peil, Kauffman, and Louis Kauffman agreed to participate, and they prepared very well, I'm sure. So I hope, and I'm glad to have them here, and I'm very excited to see what they have to tell us now at this evening, at afternoon, with their about their impressions and their exchange. So I'm very curious about that. So let us start, and from time to time I will interfere with eventually questions and trying to guide and moderate. That's my role. Thank you.
Okay, shall I begin? Shall I begin? Is that okay, everybody?
Yes,
You
yes,
can
yes,
hear me?
absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going. I should a little background. Carl joined our seminar, the seminar that I organized for a while, which is meets on Fridays, and he gave us a number of lessons about his ideas, and I thought back on that for preparing this, and I thought I would tell you a little bit about what I've learned and what I'm perhaps confused about from his work, from those lessons. So, the main theme that I understand of Carl's is the theme of order versus pattern, um, and he really emphasized the fundamental nature of this dichotomy, which is, of course, not not a disjointness, but a relationship between order and pattern that occurs over and over again at all levels. And he particularly was emphasizing how it occurs in the realm of numbers. And he calls the realm of order the Sumerian realm, the realm of pattern, the Akkadian realm. Um, I want to begin by going through an exercise that he went through with us And in fact, I can send any of these things that I'm showing you to you if you're interested. You can write me an email if you want any of the things that I happen to be playing around with here. So you can write to me at this email, lucow@gmail.com. I have a small library of some of his papers. I have other things that I'm using for the talk, so you may find them of use. And let me show you an email that we received from him at some point. That'll be the beginning here. This is his exercise of the 12 books. And as you see, he ran this exercise with us, but then he wrote a very lucid email. I think the FIS group received this email as well as us. So he said, I want to explain my exercise of the 12 books. And here you have the authors here: Abraham, Obbins, Bennett, Foster, Harris, Lipson, McGilchrist, Nadler, Penrose, Rilke, Rotman, Sardella. And over here you have the titles, somewhat abbreviated. They're real books, of course, but I'm not sure what all of them are. For example, Emperors means Penrose's book, Emperor's New Mind, and so on. Now, the 1 through 12 on the left-hand side is in the order of the list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the authors are labeled in such a way that Abraham is in the first, and Obbins is in the second, and Bennett is in the third, and so on. The titles, on the other hand, are permuted around. So we find out, looking at the first entry, that Abraham's book, now let's look at Penrose, you see, because then you see what the titles correspond. Penrose's book is Emperor's New Mind, and they're together, but they aren't together in the list, because Emperor's New Mind is or demystifying, if we went here, is in the third place. So we want to rearrange the books, and so the rearrangement is going to go like this. I read to you, and then we'll do it, but I read to you. Abraham at 1 and 3 at demystifying. Abraham needs to go to place 3, because place 3 is the place for the title of Abraham's book. Okay, fine. Abraham goes to 3, but then Bennett needs to be displaced. And Bennett needs to go to 1, so they exchange. But it could be more complicated than that. Let's do it. I hope everyone gets the idea of this game. It's a matter of interpreting 2 orders. What he didn't do in the email was rewrite these in the orders in which they would be, but then you would see Abraham's title wouldn't be here, it would be 3 down, right? And Oben's title, Imagination, would be 8 down. And we're trying to, rearrange the authors so that they appear in the correct place. So let's follow Karl's instructions and do the exercise. All right, Abraham has to be moved to 3. But that displaces Bennett. But Bennett has to be moved to 1. And then we look at the letter, because it gives you some sense of Karl. Abraham comes and pushes Bennett away. Bennett belongs to place 1. Place 1 is presently empty because we've taken the book away from there. We place Bennett on place 1, and we cry out, Exultate jubilate, habemus cyclum, or hallelujah, we got one. That is, we're done with that. We'll have to start another one. This very simple cycle, here to here and back, completes the rearrangement of Abraham and Bennett. So we go to the next one, Obbins, who is at 2, but has to be moved to 8. I'm not good at counting. Oh, there's the 8, so it's already labeled. So we're going to have to move him to 8. But that means we have to kick Nadler out, and Nadler has to go to 7. Oh, that's fine. Okay. And then McGilchrist has to go to 12. But then Sardello has to go to 6. But then Lipson has to go to 11. But then Rotman has to go to 9. But then Penrose has to go to 5. But then Harris has to go to 2. Oh, 2 is empty because that's where we started. And again, hallelujah, hallelujah, exultate jubilate. We're done with that cycle. I should have done it in a different color so that, well, we can. We can go back to the first cycle and color it red so we see it. And now we might as well do the rest of it. In the email, the last one, the last part isn't indicated. We can do it ourselves. He wanted us to do these exercises to see. So the next one would be Foster, to start with Foster, and Foster has to go to 10, as you see. So Foster wanders off to 10, and Rilke then has to go to 4. Oh, good, we're done. That came back to where it started. So you see that what happened was we got two order 2 cycles of correspondence and another cycle of order 10. The remaining 10, no, I'm sorry, of order 8. So that the comparison of orders leads to a dynamics of cycles. And I got from listening to Karl that this is really a basic insight for him, that that he understands that if you only looked at orders, you would have some orderly situation, like the pages of a book. Numbers can be just representing orders. The pages of a book are in order. The names could be in order. The titles could be in some other order. But if we start comparing one order with another, which is a special case, or maybe the general case of all comparisons that we ever do, then we arrive at dynamics and cycles, and all the things that begin to look like social exchange, psychological exchange, physics, thinking about the universe in time, all of those things are arising out of the comparison of orders. So, so he felt that we ought to do this exercise ourselves, and indeed, it's not enough to watch somebody do the exercise. You ought to try putting down 2 orders and go through and see how the cycles happen. That was his attitude, and I think it's very interesting. And we could stop here and say to you, go away, do some of this, do some comparisons of orders and see what kinds of patterns, groupings, and cycles are occurring. But I want to talk a little further about the idea of comparing order and pattern that arises in a couple of different modes. So let me stay with this one for a moment and use a new slide, if I have one. I think I already have a clean one here. This will do. But do you have any questions about the exercise to begin with? Comments or questions about that exercise of the books? Okay, then I want to point out that that this is part for this exercise of the books and the comparison of order.
Excuse me, Lou. I could comment here briefly.
Just a moment. I'm writing. Go ahead. You have a comment.
Yes, it's a comment on the basic structure that he's involving there with permutation groups, and it should.
Oh, that's what I
noting.
was just about to mention. That
Okay,
this is
so I would say that
something. This is not something special or an invention of Karl's, except for the way he's thinking about it. It's part and parcel of what we do all the time when we are studying groups and
exactly
mathematics.
my point.
Permutations.
Exactly my point.
Yes. And I want to do another exercise just to emphasize that. Groups, permutations, and symmetry. So let's do one more. Let's do one more exercise of that type to see how you could think of it in that mode. So here's a nice exercise about two orders being compared, and the orders are where the placement is of a triangle. And I have this triangle here with its vertices labeled 1, 2, and 3, and the vertices at the outset are at places 1, 2, and 3. Okay? But I could do various operations on the triangle. So you have to understand what I'm saying, that this triangle is to be thought of as a little bit of cardboard that you have labeled 1, 2, and 3, and you may have the labels on both sides of the cardboard. So you could pick it up and turn it over if you wanted to, or you could rotate it, or you could do other things to it. And then I'm going to look at the different symmetries of the triangle by thinking of ways of picking it up and putting it back so that it will still have its vertices at 1, at 2, and at 3. And of course, one way to do that is to rotate it. If I rotate it, then vertex 1 is now here, vertex 2 is here, and vertex 3 is there. That's my rotation. All right, and now we have two orders that are in different form. Now we have that 1 has been taken to 2, 2 has been taken to 3, and 3 has been taken back to 1. Another thing that we could have done with the triangle, I'll use the initial triangle, the same as before, but I could have done something else to it. And the other thing that I'm interested in doing to my triangle is rotating it up into space around a vertical axis. And that will leave 1 alone, but it will interchange 2 and 3. All right. And then you see that what I'm talking about now are permutations. And I could indicate, I'll call this one flip. It's really a flip around the vertical, right? And those are two ways of permuting the elements 1, 2, and 3. So I could do them this way. I will. I'm going to write the first one, R, as correspondent to, I'll just write equals, but it's not, of course, the same. It's a different language. But here you have 1, 2, and 3. And what happened to the 1 is that it went into the second position. What happened to 2 is it went into the third position. And what happened to 3 is that it went back to 1. So if we look at that from Karl's viewpoint, I mean the way we were diagramming the books, it would be like this. 1 goes to 2, but then 2 has to go to 3, and 3 has to go back to 1. We're done. That cycle is finished. All right? And the F is another permutation, and that one leaves 1 alone and interchanges 2 and 3. Like that. Leaves 1 alone and interchanges 2 and 3. And this would be another dynamic process if we think of what happens to 1, 2, and 3. 1 is left by itself. 2 goes to 3, and 3 goes to 2. That could have happened in the books. This would be a situation where the book and its author were both in the same row, and then you wouldn't have to do anything. So you see that Karl's language can be put into the known language of permutations, and when we do that, we get other things that we can do with the dynamics. Along with going through the cycles, we can have, for some situation, more than one permutation, more than one matching of the orders. And then we can ask what happens to them when we do more than one of them. Now let's play with this for a little bit. All I'm doing here is getting myself a little more board space, you'll pardon me. I hope I'm giving you a little time to think while I make the board a little clearer. This is the same thing that happens if you're on a blackboard. Okay, so here we are. I can ask, what would happen if first I do R and then I do F? Do them in this order. Do in this order. That will give me a new comparison of orders. It'll give me a new permutation. And there are two ways that you could think about that. One would be to go all the way back to the original situation and draw what happened. So that would mean that I would, and I will, I'll start with 1, 2, 3, and then I'll rotate, and I'll get 1, 2, 3 here. And then I'm going to flip around the vertical, and that will give me this. And that's my result, right? That's a new one. But what can you say about that? If you're thinking of going from here to here, what can you say about it? Where did 1 end up? It ended up 2 steps forward, and 3 ended up where it was. Oh, no, 3 ended up here, and 2 ended up exactly where it was. 2 ended up exactly where it was, and 1 and 3 got interchanged. Now we see what it is. It's another flip. Another flip. So that when you compose permutations, which is the other part of the dynamics that is implicit in this kind of situation, you get a new permutation, and it may be describable in a simple way. If we did it with these, we would write, look what happens here. We can do R, and then we can do F. So this is doing R, and then doing F. I'm going downward in my order of things. And then you say, well, what did I actually do? Well, you see, 1 went to 3, but 2 went to 2. So we have 1 going to 3, and 3 going to 1, and 2 going to 2. And this is, we could call this flip sub 2, and we could call this one flip sub 1, because the reference being to the reference frame, we flipped around 1, we flipped around 2, or we flipped around 3. And so you can make these compositions, And that dynamics of the compositions of the permutations is the part that is already present in many, many conversations in mathematics and modeling about thinking about symmetry and structure. And so we can widen Karl's concentration into thinking about permutations. And I wanted to say one further thing, and you may already be familiar with this, of course, but I'm hoping to remind you and to have you think about this if you were to go looking at Karl's work again. Let's go back to that theme of order and grouping. From the point of view of the permutations, we have the identity, which I will write as I, do nothing to all of them. One is corresponding to 1, 2 to 2, and 3 to 3. We have the flip of the first two. We have the flip of the second two, and we have the flip of 1 and 3. We have all of those. We have cyclic permutations which go forward and then back, and we have the other cyclic permutation which is to go in the other order. 1 goes to 3, 2 goes to 1, 3 goes to 2. And these 6, I'll call this flip sub 3, flip sub 1, rotate, that was our rotate, and this one is flip sub, I'm sorry, that's another rotation, and this one, oh, I lost a flip. No, I'm sorry, excuse me, pardon me for being inarticulate here. This was a flip. This was keeping 2 alone, and so we had flips of 2. And this one goes to 2, 2 goes to 3, 3 goes to 1. That was our rotation. What shall I call this? Well, I could call it the other rotation, but I point out to you that if you do the first rotation twice, and see where you ended up. Notice that I'm doing something very simple, and it's similar to what we did with Karl. I ask, where did I start and where did I end up? And I just simplify my diagram, okay? 2 goes to 1, and 3 goes to 2. So this is r squared. This is r times r. And that's this one. So I can call this one r squared if I like. And of course, r cubed is equal to the identity. If I do one more, if I do r cubed, it's equal to the identity. You see how that happened. You went from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, and then you went back to 1. And this is the dynamics that are happening in Karl's book exercise. So we have more. What we have, you could say, are Akkadian numerals as opposed to Roman numerals. An invention of mine as a gift to Karl's terminologies. All right, you can think of each of these permutations as Akkadian numerals. I can't spell. And I want to talk about that for a moment because you see, the Akkadian numerals embody order and pattern, and the dynamics that arises from them. Ordinary Roman numerals are 1, 2, 3, and so on, and they don't do anything. They're all identity permutations. They don't do anything at the level of pattern or dynamics in that way. They're just an ordering. They're the ordering. This, then this, then this, then this, and of course we can add them. We can take 2 and add it to 3, and we get 5. But now, of course, I don't know how to add these except by putting them next to one another, but then they will become more complex permutations if I put them next to one another. But I can multiply them like I've shown you here. I can take R and do it again and they do it again. This is the cube of this guy here. And so they have multiplication, and that multiplication is the dynamics. And you have this mixture of pattern and dynamics that goes on all the time with permutations and groups. And this is all part of present day mathematics and the modeling that we use and thoughts about information that are related to this. So that's my first take, the exercise of the books and its relationship with groups, symmetry, dynamics. He goes on with that, but I want to go to another theme of his. And for that one, I'm going to open this file, which you may be not aware of this. There is an online encyclopedia called the OEIS, the Online Encyclopedia of Integer Sequences. If you have a favorite integer sequence, like say the Fibonacci sequence, in fact, let me demonstrate it for you on the web, so you see. You might actually want to use it someday. Let me see. I'm trying to get for myself the web.
To have, maybe you can.
All right. I hate to start without Lou, but we had a wonderful 3-hour conversation yesterday. If you want to stop me if he comes back, let me know. Okay, so thank you all for this great opportunity, and especially to Lou, to honor our dear Karl. I'm Katherine Kauffman, as a relative newcomer to the FIS community. I jumped in a few years ago to lead a discussion of the informational component of emotion using the Eastern metaphor of the Tao. It was definitely confusing, if not controversial, new territory. So some of you maybe remember me as Kung Fu Kate, an affectionate moniker bestowed upon me by Eric Warner, who I think is with us today, in honor of an apparent prowess for deflecting rather than answering pointed questions. But bless his heart, Karl was one of the few that understood my answers, often fleshing them out with tantalizing bridges to his own work. Karl was a unique voice among the community of learned friends, and he consistently offered insightful messages with charm, humor, and style. So, our brilliant, enigmatic Karl. I say enigmatic because Karl was notoriously opaque. He spoke his own unique language, often cryptic. They were koan-like expressions that had the feel to me of the Tao that cannot be spoken. But Karl's range was remarkable. He was a seasoned psychologist and a visionary number theorist, offering a general theory of natural order with implications for the complexity sciences, physics, biology, and computational technology. His passion to initiate the community into the realm of Akkadian counting seemed like the work of a mystic, if not a benevolent alien. So, the rite of passage into Karl's world was his book sorting experiment, which he implied would deliver a trove of insight into the many hidden mathematical patterns lost upon our fully Sumerian trained minds. But after conducting myself the book experiment several times, I felt that most of his wisdom remained out of reach. But from what I did grok, I found a surprising number of links between his framework and my own, what I call the agent in the machine story, some of which I shared with my Tao metaphor. And these are links from the deterministic physical patterning all the way to the binary logic that I saw encoded in emotional qualia. But while I have a platonic respect for mathematics, I do not speak the language well at all. So enter Lou Kauffman, interpreter extraordinaire, who is fluent in every aspect, every domain of mathematics. So Lou invited Karl, as he said, to deliver a series of presentations from which he gleaned what we've just heard and much more, clearly enough to take all of us much further into Karl's domain. But for me, my approach will be based on the fact that Karl and I share a background in psychology, the entire domain of subjective experiences afforded by the living embodiment and the nature of our behavioral hardware. Even our best physical theories cannot help us at all on issues of identity, value, or consciousness. Alas, I now regret the unfinished nature of my interactions with Karl. It seems like we were just getting started. So I want to honor him today by pointing to the many spaces his work seemed to lead. So, particularly in the psychology of emotional experience, which was my field that I've been talking about. Information itself, which we're all trying to figure out in this community, a binary logic. How does this impact value, identity? And what I was seeing was a yes-no logic that you could also observe in approach and avoidant behavior that links directly to the pleasure and reward circuits and pain and punishment of Pavlovian learning. And Karl was just right at the center of all of that. So it tapped into systems science, quantum biology, all of this stuff. There's Karl there. There were links to complexity science where simple rules yield complex behavior. There's connections all over the place. Karl was very, led me everywhere. Anyway, this was the idea of feedback, feelings as cybernetic feedback signals, which is where the real nitty gritty of our thought intersected, where, you know, what I call the fundamental semantic information bit was at work in every step of this cycle, meaning that we needed to somehow perceive this information between the internal and external aspects of our environment. There's Karl again. So a core idea was computation at the edge of chaos. The idea of criticality, which is ground zero for both computation and sensitivity, which means literally the sensitivity of our organism. There's Karl again. So with the help of ChatGTP, I fed his two latest papers in and came up with this wonderful little thought bubble of the main themes of Karl's work. And I'm happy to share that little chat because I found it really helpful. But the most thing of excitement for me was his concurrent way of counting, that there are two different ways, Akkadian and Sumerian, and that we really needed both to understand a much bigger story, because each one came with it its own sort of structural geometry and informational architecture that we needed both halves to understand. So as in my Taoist story, the duality was the first thing that captured me, and he was leading into areas that I'd been looking into rather alone, so it was wonderful to have some companionship. So as Lou said, one of the core themes of his work is this dynamic cybernetic relationship between pattern and order, which in any yin-yang complement is huge to the dualities that I see from conjugate variables in mathematics all through the binary off-on switching and coordination dynamics writ large in the human embodiment, and in fact in every physical embodiment, all the way up to the hedonic valence, where you have a binary experiences, some of which feel pleasurable and some of which feel painful, which I suggest goes all the way down to the sort of 0-1 computational logic of regulatory processes all across the body, like, the immune, and include self-regulatory processes, actually, from immune system functioning to genetic and epigenetic processes that depend on some sort of information about identity, how it's bounded, how it's open, how all of these wonderful things. So the duality was the key idea, but that he also, there were very specific aspects of what he was doing that are all about the computational process. Oh, I had this in sorry, I think we saw some of this already, but the idea of comparison that Lou talked, that there's a comparison between
Excuse
these,
me, excuse me.
yeah?
What happened? Did you
You-
guys lose me completely?
Here,
Yes,
I
yes.
can stop and you can jump back in if you'd like, Lou.
Well, I want to know, I just want to interrupt and find out at what point did you lose me?
We were trying to get us online to that wonderful OEIS website, and that's when you disappeared.
I see. Okay, well then why don't you go ahead and then I'll come back in and talk about what I said.
Okay,
Okay, great.
and then feel free to correct me. But I'm sorry, this is a little scattered. I was working on it all night after a wonderful conversation with Lou. But the key idea here is that of comparison, a comparison between two reference points, two streams of information. And what I saw happening in the emotional system all began with a perceptual comparison of the internal and the external worlds, what I call the self, not self comparison. So this implies an identity boundary that was always something that could not be explained by the simple chemistry that was already explained by the mechanism, the behavioral chemistry, this little cybernetic loop, which is literally the chemistry on the E. coli bacterium that drives its approach and avoidant behavior. Now, of course, you can argue that it's a simple machine, but I'm arguing that this comparison, error signaling, and self-correction, the signal and the self-correction are encoded in our experiences of emotional qualia, which are feelings and behavioral corrections. And then the good or bad categories are fed back into the learning system such that the model can continue to build. And this is the same model that's used by the perception action loop and people that are building intelligent robots, except for that their signal is not binary, it's singular. They call it surprise. So the comparison is really central to what I thought was fascinating and important. And when we were in the middle of some of these conversations, it occurred to me that Karl's comparison at the very bottom, at this conflict that he talked about between these two complementary ways of in the dynamic system. He called them actually affectionately Elmo and Magna, which were like two separate but completely entangled yin-yang identity structures that were doing two different things. And it occurred to me that that's exactly what was showing up in the self, not self comparison, and all of the implications for what the self is, not just the body, but the building of the mind is immediate interaction with the contextuality of the environment and its adaptability, all of those things. But it occurred to me during this that Karl, he was talking about a NAND gate, a not and reference between self and not yet self. And so that's something that we're having an ongoing discussion about, and maybe Lou can give us more clarity on that now that he's back. But anyway, in this thought bubble, I was going to point out the different areas. And in his philosophical frame, he was literally talking about potential versus realized relationships, which gets directly to, and how that shows up in biological syntax. So that gets directly to where my own thought in trying to understand the real deep substrates of how the emotional stream of information is different, but entangled with higher cognitive functions. So it really takes us all the way to the physics of reality creation, where we have here the sort of Whiteheadian view of the Platonic world, the physical world, and the mental world, and how the three of them interact. He's
Penrose.
this is Roger Penrose, and it links with ideas from Wheeler to David Bohm and my own husband Stewart, who advocates the realm of this Platonic realm is the realm of res potentia, where it's beyond space-time, a space of potential out of which the actual is realized. And the role of the mental world in between is the one that I emphasize as agentic actualization. So this idea of potential relations is right there in Karl's work. And during our interactions, there would be just subtle little comments that would imply direct connections to these ideas that I found really amazing. So the idea of pattern then would sort of fall in the Platonic world, and then the idea of order would fall in the physical world, and the two of them interact via this, sort of coordinating these two flows of information. One Akkadian that sort of comes from the Platonic world, one Sumerian that comes from the physical world, and that those two streams are being integrated in some sort of a process that is counterpart to the informational translations of the computational model. So again, here's the tautologies with the double accounting, the bazaar of similarity, diversity in number, limits, all of this, the cycles, which ultimately boil down to the issue of identity being manifested in these two different streams of identity. And the only way to make sense of this has come from Lou, using the George Spencer Brown's laws of form, in this idea of a distinction, which many of us are familiar with. But I love the idea of there existing nothingness until a mark is made. And once that mark is made, it automatically brings with it a background. So Karl was always talking about backgrounding and foregrounding. And to me, one of the central cloudy issues is identity boundaries. They seem to be structured and conserved, and yet at the same time, they have to be open to thermodynamic flows. And so the whole idea of boundaries is very interesting to me. And since Karl and I both come from psychology, where boundaries and attachment, relational stuff is all right in the center of all this. So what I have been coming to is that this idea of the identity boundary, the form that separates foreground from background, internal from external, and even subject from object, is actually the creation of a subjective reference frame. So those of us that are in the movement to restore the organism to theory, both in biology and physics, this to me implies a sort of a subjective relativity that is a mirror counterpart of Einstein's, locating from a third-party perspective the fact that there are these different coordinates that are going to be affected by the motion and orientation of the experiencing subject. So this idea of self-referencing, this comparison between two streams of information that carry identity information about who we are in our wake-a-day state and information about who we are not yet in the realm of potentia, which we actually dream about. And this is the whole domain of Jungian collective unconscious and patterns and imagery that are meaningful, that are coming from some source that we are not yet fully conscious of. And so it's really this comparison between the part and the whole of our identity. And what this slide is about is that the magic of ChatGTP that changed everything in 2019 was a paper that came out about the role of self-attention, the way that they were able to design these chat models to refer to a whole. Each part refers to the whole. And it's called it's the self-referencing part, querying the whole. And that they captured was actually probably going on at the source of this computational process. So another aspect of his philosophical frame was that it was a rewriting of the Tractatus. Essentially, Luke can speak a lot more about this, but in the most general sense, he was identifying a natural sort of order within language that gave rise to language. and there are many talking about this, but his particular struck me as the hidden order within language has to do with criticality, and this whole idea of order at the edge of chaos. A colleague of Stu's, the wonderful Stefan Turner, has done an analysis of this little chart in the middle of German, Russian, French, Italian, and English, and he finds these very, very clear power laws like Zipf's law and Heath's law. But it's pointing to the very kind of order within language that Karl is suggesting when he talks about this being a rewrite of the Tractatus. And what it said to me was that his pattern is exactly the signal, the signal that I've been talking about that's rooted in resonance. And in Stefan Turner's work, he's this middle chart with this signature of criticality indicates 1 over F peak noise. And that's the idea that these patterns within chaos that are hidden, that may very well imply the agency and choice making and information processing of the agent, is the signature of what I'm saying is the edge of chaos. And when we can listen and attune to that signal, we get the kind of coherence that's required for collective behavior and the evolution of new, higher levels of complexity. So at the very bottom, what I'm suggesting is that Karl's patterns are indeed informational signals, and they are concerning they are our way of feeling our own dual identity, finding our optimal set point, because we each have a unique geometry with our own fundamental vibration, if you will. And at the same time, we have this me, we, part, and whole identity structure that goes all the way down. So we also have the resonant harmonics with others where we can attune ourselves to the edge of chaos such that we can be both a part of a greater collective and a whole in a coherent state. And the whole idea of rotations and flipping that Lou just introduced us to are borne out in what are called the coordination dynamics of the stance of opposites, on-off switching, that balance these dual opposites all the way through our biological systems and that are coarse-grained in our feelings of pleasure and pain. So that's just the very lowest level of what emotion means, but it's a logic that's been lost on us. So to wrap things up, this idea that there's creative, autopoetic self-actualization going on at each tick through this machinery, and all we need to do is follow the simple rule of binary feeling to self-actualize, if you will. So that's really a scattershot of what I want to say about how inspired I was by Karl's work, and I want to thank you all, and particularly Karl. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. It was a great presentation with very nice visualization of all these interesting concepts. So I will wrap it all when Lou is finishing. So I see he is preparing now. But yeah, very interesting ideas. Lou?
Okay, I'll come back. Here's our
same phenomenon.
fractal form. Just a moment, and we'll come back. Now, let me see. You heard me talk about this part, right? Where we talked about permutations. That was in, right?
You were just taking us to the website for the second part.
Yes,
well, but I'm asking, I need to know where we stopped. So you heard this part about permutations and symmetry.
Yes.
All right. And then I started talking about, let me get the OEIS. I won't go to the OEIS site because I didn't, because that will take us, oh, I'm sorry, just a moment. Something wrong. There we go. Right. Here we are. This is a reproduction of the OEIS site. And this is where we got lost. But you can look up the site, and then you will find any number sequence you care to give it that happens to be known. It'll give you information about it. In this case, this is Karl, and he put this on the site. This number sequence is related to comparing order and grouping. And it corresponds to the following graph, which I can operate without knocking us off. So he is graphing the following thing. He's graphing the log of the number of partitions of n squared, and I have to admit I don't know why squared, but we'll talk about that, minus the log of n factorial. So we're talking about the difference between partitioning and factorializing. And what does that mean? So let's look at the numerics of it. When you talk about the partitions of a number, take 4, for example, you're looking at the number of ways of thinking of that number as groupings. 4 can be thought of as a group of 3 and a group of 1, or as 2 groups of 2, or as a group of 2 and 2 groups of 1, or as 4 groups of 1. Those are all the different ways that groupings can occur for 4. And the number of partitions of a number is the number of groupings. So that measures groupings. And this is a very interesting function which people have thought about a lot. See, there's 7 of them for 5, and so on. And it goes up like that. Factorial, on the other hand, as you well know, is the number of ways to reorder something, the number of orders. So, for example, 3 factorial.
1.
3 factorial is 3 times 2 times 1 by definition, but it's 6. And that 6 is the number of different ways of reordering 3 things, which I've indicated here and pointed out have dynamics of their own, just like Karl likes to think of permutations having dynamics. While we're talking about permutations, let's stay with the subject. So then in this part of his work, he decided to make a kind of numerical graph of the comparison between ordering, grouping, partitions, and ordering, factorial, and writes this numerical function which is looking at the difference between them. And you find that in the range between 0 and 136 with this function, you see that in the middle range there's this kind of good reasonable difference between them, and then it falls off and one is dominant or the other is dominant. And there's this middle range where there's this kind of correlation or talk between grouping and ordering. And this is significant for him. And significant enough so that he not only made the graph himself, but what happened to our OEIS, but put it on the encyclopedia. And the people who run the encyclopedia thought it was interesting enough to publish. So there it is. And you can find, if you look it up, some discussion of what it means. So I read you a bit of it because it's interesting from the point of view of messages. The original definition was the number of messages maximally transmittable by using n objects as a non-sequenced collection. That's grouping. How many messages can you make by using the groupings, expressed as a percentage of the number of messages maximally transmittable by using n objects as a sequenced collection? So a kind of ratio of grouping to order. And then there's more, and I'll leave it to you to read more, but this is part of his mathematical investigation that's quite interesting. So I wanted to mention that and give you some access to it. I have the program which you might be interested in playing with if you use Mathematica, or you can try this on your own computer and see how this graphing works. And you can also look up more about it in the OEIS. And you'll get some references also to Karl's work out of this. So altogether, that's some access. After that, let me go back to my my thing here. I wanted to mention that some things that are in the vicinity of this very much. So, for example, when you're doing permutations, let's take some permutation, in fact, and just go through that exercise again. I'm just making some arbitrary permutation, choosing it at random, as they say, but maybe I'll do wait, that's enough. But now, if you did the Karl exercise, if you have a permutation, there's a dynamic associated with the permutation. The Karl exercise for permutation can be done just like we did with the books. We can say, okay, let's start with 1. 1 goes to 2, but 2 goes to 3, and 3 goes to 4, and 4 goes back to 1, done. And 5 goes to 6, and 6 goes to 5. And so you see, this is something that we do, and we tend to notate it this way. If you have a permutation, then you have the dynamics of that permutation. The permutation, as we tend to say, factors into a product of cycles, because that's what will happen. You'll have things like 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. Finally, you come back to where you started. Then you start all over again. You get more and more cycles, so that permutations, cycles, the dynamics of them are all happening. And we're comparing structures directly point to point. But if you go into that notion of dynamics of comparison, then you'll recall that all of this also lives in some other contexts that are worth mentioning. First of all, there's the one that Kate was talking about, which is figure and ground. And so even if I were to do something as simple as an inside and an outside of a circle, then there is the context of the circle being very simple, but the circle might be more complicated, and there might be other messages that you could think of that are related to this. Oops, I'm going to have to go back up.
From the outside.
So when you draw a more complicated entity, which is just a distinction, that entity, I had meant to draw a couple of faces looking at one another and got involved in the topology. That there are many structures that you're likely to see at different levels in a given structure, and those are other kinds of dynamics of comparison. And then on top of that, there is the matter of fractals, where you are dealing with dynamics of another kind. You may say, okay, the basic dynamics I'm looking at is I take an edge and I cut 1/3 out of the middle and I put in a little triangle. But then I can do it again. I can cut 1/3 out of the middle and put in a little triangle. And then I can cut 1/3 out of the middle of that and put in a little triangle, and I can keep on going forever. And you get this Koch curve, fractal. And the fractal in the limit has the property that you have it here, but when you look at it, it decomposes into 4 copies of itself. So you're making a different kind of point comparison, not a point-to-point comparison, but a comparison of how the form is informed within itself by that form. In the case of fractals, you have the inside of the Koch curve are 4 copies of the Koch curve. And the ruler that you use there is a ruler of comparison of reference and self-reference. So Kate was talking about self-reference, and you can think of the Koch curve as in your eyes referring to itself, because when you look inside it, you find those copies of itself. And there are many comparisons of this kind that are going on that we're certainly interested in, and they are. I think Karl would say that they all come from this kind of comparison at base. But it would be interesting to be able to talk to him about those things. I wanted to mention also something that Kate was saying about distinction and NAND. If you look at laws of form in terms of process, then you may use this kind of diagramming, which is well known to engineers. You start with a state here, A, and you end up over here with the opposite state, which I'll write as cross A. So if this was white, then you end up over here with the opposite, whatever the opposite of it is, black. And in the boundary between white and black, you are neither black nor white. So what happens when you are thinking about that boundary, that it is a self-referential boundary for whatever you're defining, you have the motion from one side to the other, like from white to black. But when you get near the boundary, when you get very near the boundary, you find that where you're going back directly into the boundary, and at the boundary you're neither white nor black, you are in the self-referential boundary. So the boundary becomes self-referential in that sense. And in terms of this kind of diagramming, it's explicit in that the cycle comes right back into itself like that. And you're looking at articulations of self-reference. But of course, in our own understood situations of various kinds, from our own psychology to looking at the way cybernetic systems behave, that recursion or self-reference of the system that is giving rise to its autonomy or itself can be very, very subtle, and certainly much more possibly articulated than just a cycle. But cycles are at the base of it. And so there are all these connectivities between Karl's work and his emphasis on order, pattern, and process, and many of the domains that we are concerned with when we're thinking about information, cybernetics, topology, mathematics in general, modeling in general. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Lou. Thank you very much, Kate. Both presentations were so insightful. And I have a question. Actually, I wish to encourage you to think further in this direction. Personally, I'm interested in the practical aspects of using these seeds that Karl was trying to implant within our community. I mean, these ideas of a generous or generic base for any scientific field. So even in psychology, in mathematics, in physics, in a way how we can find these patterns and orders, generalize them, create bridges between different fields by using these patterns and orders, and the practical aspects of using this. For instance, in psychology, I recall I had a late psychotherapist. She was trying to link some generic ideas common for many people, like resonance, like circle, like loops, feedbacks, and all these efforts to eventually create a personal approach to the person, and go towards healing his problem. I mean, for instance, in language therapy, whatever. So how we could use these concepts and that are generic for every human being. On the other hand, with loose efforts, I was fascinated in different fields in mathematics that they're almost created in the same manner. For instance, in algebraic geometry, to find some rules and operations, operands that are similar to other fields in mathematics. So basically, as if every single field or theory is created in the same manner. And what I'd like to encourage us, and I was interested previously in the field that I tried to push, integral biomatics, is to find a new idea and eventually develop, for instance, mathematics or another field in trying to find a new concept and eventually develop it in a new way. And in such a way to develop the whole field of science. And when we talk about this and relate it to this new field of artificial intelligence and chat GPT, and we can learn and teach ourselves by using these fields and finding these patterns, but also some artificial tools that could help us also develop our own science and help us to understand some deeper ideas. I referred earlier, Lou was not here, but people like David Deutsch and even Brian Josephson were trying to find foundational fields in physics that or concepts and theories that lie even below what we know at the moment, like quantum theory and Planck scale, these kinds of concepts. So I consider and understand Karl as someone that was trying to give us all these comparisons and ideas and efforts. So eventually in some later or discussions, we could try to find or discuss in different fields like psychology or even mathematics, physics, how can we build a new field by introducing a new idea, trying to sort it out with the available concepts in this field and expand it. So you recall probably the expansion theory of Grassmann. I was wondering why this name is not within Karl's books, but there are also other authors that are addressing that kind of generalization of practical methods of how you can develop a mathematical field, whether in logic or a new kind of logic, a new kind of even not theory, another. So how do you think about that? And maybe my way is to find some practical methodology of how we can, we as humans and our tools, like those that are used in artificial intelligence, can eventually help us develop science further. So thank you. What do you think about that?
Yeah, a comment on what you were saying, Plamen. The thing that Karl is pointing us to is something that people sometimes forget. They think of mathematics as primarily some method of computing one thing or another. And here we're looking at the modeling enterprise and mathematics in particular as looking at patterns and correspondences and groupings. And if you think of mathematics as the study of patterns, then you understand much better what it's about, because then you immediately run into the fact that if you have a pattern of some kind, it may actually apply to an enormous multitude of possibly different things. It's a truism in mathematics, but we keep forgetting it and remembering it again. that a threefold cycle could be any number of different possible cycles. The mathematics of a pendulum, if you look at the mathematics of it swinging, is the same as the mathematics of the way the electric and magnetic fields in a certain
Absolutely.
circuit are oscillating back and forth. Entirely different situations having the same underlying pattern. Or Einstein's equations for the universe are about how the curvature and geometry of space-time on the one hand is related to the energy and dynamics of the world on the other hand, so that you are finding in big breakthroughs like that correspondences between different domains that are very beautiful and large and also precise at the same time. So that attitude of shifting your attitude to looking at process and pattern is very important for taking a step in the direction of doing something new.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that new will be, it's going to be involved in process and pattern.
Thank you. I think Law and Form, your famous mathematician, his approach was Brown. I mean, his approach was as if he was using the same principles. I mean, basically, we start with some basic principles and methods like, flipping patterns. I mean, some basic operation. We don't need the whole theory. We need some basic information, and we can build this theory out of these basic transformations and components. So that's a major message probably in every
Oh,
field
right.
of
So
mathematics.
you're looking for the right components. And
For the right.
sometimes there's more than one way of building something that you have to be
Absolutely,
thinking about.
absolutely.
But you often are looking for what's my local toolkit of basic things that I can do, and putting them together. Like maybe I'm enamored of woodwinds, and then I'm going to learn how to use woodwinds. But it isn't the only way to do music. It's just the way
Absolutely.
that I happen to like to do music.
Hmm. And the same is in psychology and the human sciences. I mean, we try to find individual approaches, and this is what I learned. I mean, from my late psychologist, she was trying to find metaphors, for instance, from fairy tales, stories, and things that are common for every human, in order to catch and find out what this person is, adaptive to. How can I heal this person? I mean, this is how she was explaining me. I mean, in her language therapy, the approach, I saw here very similar methods in mathematics, also in business. I mean, she was giving examples from Edward de Bono's hats, different colored hats, and approaches to solving problems in business. And I mean, we have very common principles everywhere, and by combining them, for instance, I could imagine having some kind. I mean, if you apply these methods, you can probably create a discipline like psychological, not theory, or I mean,
Well, in fact, R.D. Laing created that discipline. He wrote a book called Knots. Remember?
Yes.
And the funny thing is, they really are like knots. Those little paragraphs about interrelationships of people. Some of them are negative, some of them are positive, but they have to do with I do something, which causes you to do something, which causes me to do something, and we're in that interlock of the relationship.
Yeah, great.
And what he didn't do, it's funny to me, he didn't draw one diagram because he called it knots, but he could have actually drawn some pictures of knots and shown how those different knots corresponded to his knots.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, if we try to adapt or develop our AI tools in this way, I mean, to use the same kind of methodology, maybe we can get much further in our, wishes or creating science, solving problems, basically, from the practical way. I mean, at the moment, the AI tools that we have are using available information, and they still have not tried to link, I mean, or bridge different kinds of grouping.
Yes, Plamen, that's what we're trying to do.
If you go to a large language model and you ask it, tell me about the relationship between general relativity and quantum theory, for example, it'll give you an enormous long lecture, quite erudite, and and lots. You can ask it for relationships, and it tells you relationships that exist in the huge literature that it has digested or not digested.
Yeah.
Yes.
But imagine you try to use this information to let the tool develop its own theory. For instance, an AI created theory that
you
is
should
very
try this.
like,
I've had some experiences where I told the AI, I have this idea. What do you think of this idea? And it, in its large language model way, takes the small things I say and rearticulates them into larger things, sometimes making connections. And it sometimes makes connections that are very resonant for me. You know, they feel like, oh, he actually said something that I like, which means that it's sort of articulating my own way of thinking. So my way of talking is related to my way of thinking, and it's good at playing with the talking and permuting it, and it feeds back, and you feel like you're developing some ideas through the use of it.
You're describing your emotional sense. Exactly.
I'm describing my emotional relationship to the AI.
No, you're using the feedback of your own feeling to interact and alter your own perspective. That's exactly what I've been trying to say.
Right, and it didn't have to be an AI. It could have been the dog barked at midnight, or it could be I'm having a serious discussion with you, and we both get some good ideas. That emotional part is very important.
Yeah, well, you even used the term resonance. And I just want to throw out there that in our practical toolkits, we should start paying attention to emotional resonance and emotional dissonance, because we'll find that it is everywhere in our lives. And that when there is dissonance, that just simply means that there's a miscommunication or a misunderstanding that we need to unravel and get back to a resonant state. Couples therapy is all about good communication, and when you're thinking about it in the physical sense, there's the idea of frustrated plaquettes, where you have dissonance and resonance and relational dynamics, but all of this springs from our emotional sense and our lack of understanding what the two poles are doing, how they're working together to guide us in our own thinking, because it's all balled up with the idea of good and evil and us versus them. And anyway, there's lots to say about that. But just this morning, we had a discussion with Philip Ball, and one of the conclusions was that we need a new narrative for that has teleology in it. One that really discards the idea that teleonomy is simply just the mirage, and that actually gives the agent its due and the capacities of the organism to influence its own evolutionary trajectory, its own adaptation, its own phenotypical development has been there from the very beginning. So it was a really fun discussion, and some of us were saying, okay, we need to move from the computational story to something more that includes the cenome, the collection of sensory systems and how they impress upon the body, everything from bioelectric signals to what Zurich, my Vortex Zurich is calling quantum Darwinism, where that there's literally informational records hanging in our world that make it easier for all of us to communicate, and it gives us a consistent objective world, which is something akin to Rupert Sheldrake's morphogenic resonance, but it's justified now by the idea of decoherence, and yet when something decoheres, it hangs as information in the environment. So it really, for me, it lends to the idea that there's much more to the idea of an environment than just physical stimulus, because you have an Umwelt, which is the physical stimulus, and how it relates to your own Eigenwelt, but that you also have a Mitwelt. And so the people that talk about the environment as a selector, or a witness or an informer, are all getting at this idea that there is information that we are privy to, our bodies, our organisms are privy to it, and all we need to know is if it feels good or feels bad, to tap into that logic.
A quick comment. Paul Dirac said that, and I'm misquoting him, of course, is the key to doing theoretical physics is to search for the beauty in the equations.
Yeah.
And that is a statement about the relationship between the emotional level and the intellectual level. And of course, what would be beautiful for Dirac might be quite different from what would be beautiful to you or me. But it gives us an understanding of him, of how he stood in relation to his work.
He's a Platonist, the good, the true, and the beautiful. And once the logic of the evaluative logic in emotion is understood, then it does connect our general aesthetics. And I'm just talking about basic physiological aesthetics, not culturally instilled, whether it's right or wrong to dance on a Friday night. That's completely different than the physiological information about our values and our universal biological needs. Eric, I know you've had your hand up for quite a while. Same with you, Krasimir.
Should I start? Okay,
Go ahead.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. There are two basic kinds of comments I wanted to make. Well, first was I think mathematics is more like a sketching. I see using mathematics to sketch. But the one thing that led I didn't know, I realized before, is the relationship of what you guys are doing and cancer networks. You know, I've done a paper on cancer networks where you see the dynamics of these kinds of networks and how they influence the development of a cancer, and has very specific mathematical properties. And it relates very much to the kind of diagrams that you, Lou, were doing. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing I see is the relationship with Kate's work on social intentions. Like I've developed a theory of intentional states, formalizing, going beyond von Neumann to formalize intentional states so that we can understand social processes as not just a physical world, but a whole social world of intentions. The other thing that relates to that is that perhaps I see emotions as in the context of an intentional state, an intentionality of self and other as well. And the process of individuation that Winnicott talks about in the boundaries of self are related to that as well. The other little comment I wanted to make, you mentioned Wittgenstein and Tractatus. Well, I've developed, theories of formalized Wittgensteinian language games. In other words, Wittgenstein version 2, where we don't just talk about truth, but talk about kinds of languages that are neither true or false, namely questions, commands, etc. So that's the other thing that kind of fits in. That fits very well with the emotional social world, because the entire social world isn't just about facts about the world, but facts about intentionality and transforming intentional states. And that's under my theory, that's how this stuff works. These intentional states are transformed by this other aspect of language. And that's what Wittgenstein was getting at when his friend in the train station said to him, what does your theory about flipping my finger? He flipped his finger. He said, what's your theory say about this? And Wittgenstein actually thought about it and developed his version 2. Anyway, so that's two things, the cancer networks and social intentions that may integrate some of this stuff.
A quick comment about Wittgenstein. I'm going to try to quote Karl. I may be quoting him incorrectly. Quote, Wittgenstein said the world is everything that is the case, I say the world is everything that is a coincidence, unquote.
Like resonance.
Coincidence is correspondence, pattern correspondence, of course.
Yeah.
Unfolded a little.
Yeah, but the world is more than just
So
everything in this case. It's more than coincidence.
Things in Karl's view, just coincidences, patterns, correspondences.
Also close to
That's
Carl
beautiful.
Jung's ideas. I mean, on Kate's
Synchronicity,
exactly synchronicity. Yes.
serendipity.
Basically, Karl is our Karl is a scholar of all these schools, so he can very well combine these ideas and use them. So basically, I feel that we all are understanding all these efforts, and what Karl delivered to us was trying to excite us about these basic foundations, how we can bridge our fields with his understanding. And what I find is also this way, maybe mathematicians are the mystics among all the scientists, because in every theory there is some part of magic, in number theory and in knot theory for sure. So basically, I think that they can develop a common, a joint language. So, but to wrap this all and trying to finish our discussion, I suggest that we continue it in a later time. I mean, we didn't lose a group or we create another group. This is a very interesting aspect, because I'm I'm sorry for these people
We haven't
that are
heard
trying
from
to contact
Krasimir
me.
yet.
Yeah. But basically, I'm interested in continuing the discussion in creating a methodology based on Karl's ideas, how to develop our own fields, or eventually enhance our own exchange within these fields, within our groups, because there are very practical aspects. I mean, of how to develop a field, how to expand it, extend it, and find another. I mean, this book exercise is also very exciting. Maybe we can increase it from 12 to 24 books, or even more.
Or look at other permutation situations. Yeah.
Yeah,
As
absolutely.
Karl did. Karl has beautiful pictures of dynamics of all sorts that are coming out of that in his papers.
Yeah. So
let Pedro and Krasimir talk too yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, let Pedro and Krasimir talk.
Okay, thank you. I will try to share my screen. I hope you see. I want to return you to Legacy of Karl. I have chance to participate in publishing of two of his papers. Unfortunately, the last paper was published this year, but I think his main paper, Counting in Cycles, is more important. It was published in 2022. This paper contains all his main thoughts about cycles, and he created very interesting figures, schemes of cycles. This paper, if you not know this now, I can give you a link or the original paper. So maybe we may continue. From my point of view, what is the very important my achievement of Karl? I think we all day talk about books, but I think we may formulate a theorem of Javorszky, which may be like this. For every set, we may create many types, many permutations, and we may define that in every set of permutations, we may find at least one and maximum n cycles where when we have n cycle, this is identity. And basic of this theorem, he tried to create a theory of different relation between cycles in permutations.
Right. This is, excuse me, this is what I was saying. The first step in group theory is that every permutation can be decomposed as a product of cycles. That's Karl's step. But it is the very first step in group theory. And group theory continues building. Much of it is unknown to most people because of the way we miseducate people in mathematics.
Yes. And I think this is a very interesting point of view because Karl was not mathematician, but reinvent many interesting regularities and write good papers, I think, at the end. He has some problems with reviewers, but at the end we publish his 2 papers. So this is what I wanted to mention about Karl and to remember his nice achievement of our society.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Krasimir.
Thank
So, Pedro, Dana is also there.
Okay. Okay.
And Jerry too. I mean, it's
Actually, Karl started his public career in cooperation with my group, small group, at the University of Zaragoza. He came for some lectures. And I remember I was fascinated by his idea that if you consider a set n, the number of distinctions you can make are limited. And it is very different if you are talking about just a single symbol, so a single property, than a collection of symbols that you throw on in different way on the elements of the set. In the first case, the description Karl was following is called unidimensional partitions. In the second case, it is called multidimensional partitions. And then we had, in this, we were almost 2 years cooperating, and we tried to make systematic achievement of all the multidimensional partitions of a set N. And it was a very, very hard, very strenuous work. And I think we succeeded for a set of 2 elements, it's very easy. For 3 elements, it's relatively easy. For 4 elements, it is very complex. For 5 elements, it is breathtaking. But it was almost finished by Maurice Villarroel. And then we had a discussion on what was the relationship of the empirical finding we are having, because at the same time there were other marginal, let's say, discoveries. One is the enigmatic constancy of 7. When you throw the partitional decomposition of integers into a whole pot, then you won't believe me, but I mean, you decompose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into its components, all the partitions you can make of each of these numbers. And then, believe me, 7 is constant. When you throw everything in the pot, all the parts of all the numbers in the pot, 7 is constant.
What do you mean when you say it's constant?
That there is always the same proportion of 7 in the pot, irrespective of what you throw in. Yeah, we made the numbers.
If you have some notes on that, I'd be interested in seeing them. I can't tell from the way you're talking about it what the boundaries are of that statement, but it'd be very interesting to see the data.
Yeah, I think I have a publication where I think, Kate, you have some reading of one of my publications where the constancy of 7 was mentioned.
Maybe you could send a copy of that to me.
Yeah, And
To all of us.
there are power laws
Yeah.
with different elements.
I have to tell you, I'm very fascinated by the way certain small numbers work in mathematics. Like there's a big breaking concept between things that involve 4 and things that involve 5, for example, and it occurs across different areas of mathematics. So this is very interesting.
Yeah, we found that the 7 is not exactly constant. But there is a very tiny oscillation, almost a sinusoidal oscillation, very small, very tiny. I mean, it grows the proportion of 7, it goes down a little bit, it ascends, but it was, for us, it was completely unexpected. But I have a question to you, Lo, because I have seen that Karl have referred to unidimensional partitions for any n question mark.
That's what I was talking about with those graphs. The n question mark was his definition of one of those functions.
Yeah.
That function.
But
The function, the log of the number of partitions squared minus the log of the n factorial. That was his n question mark.
But this is what I have read from your screen on some encyclopedia. I have seen that it was referred to unidimensional partitions, and my understanding was that this was the number of multidimensional partitions, which is far larger than unidimensional partitions. And I was surprised to see that.
Well, yeah, maybe we have to talk privately about the definitions of things. I don't know what you mean by the multi-partitions that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, you can build partitions of the set n referring to a single quality. And then you find elements who have 3 times this quality, another has 2 times the same quality.
Yeah.
But if you consider 2 qualities or 3, you find in one element, you find, for instance, 2 qualities with level 1. In another, you find these 2 qualities with level 2. Another with 0 qualities. Another, and these multidimensional partitions, when you consider the whole number of available symbols, because also are limited, you cannot, because the key is distinctions. I mean, you cannot obtain further distinctions by adding more and more qualities. They are redundant. You can eliminate them.
So you mean things like, I would like to know the number of partitions of a number into odd numbers, or into even numbers, or into squares, or, different qualities that you could assign.
Yeah, general
May I
qualities.
say, Pedro, excuse me, about n question, I wanted to share what Karl defined this type of different spaces. In n question, he notes Newtonian space. This is 2 types of spaces, Euclid space and another Newton space, which is 3-dimensional or more dimensions. So this is his understanding of n question mark. So with n question mark, he denotes Newton space.
I haven't understood what he's doing with those assignments of geometry. Maybe you understand it.
Yeah. I give you this paper where he talk about this, and it is very interesting point of view.
So question mark is not factorial. It is another.
Yes.
So the question mark is that difference function. The question mark function is that difference function that is taking a difference between partitioning and factorial.
Yes.
Well, let me say that at the beginning of Karl's work, n question mark was the number of multidimensional partitions.
Yes.
Oh.
It was n
Yes, yes, yes. I look
Absolutely.
for
I mean, I have his
definition
first
here.
publications and my our cooperations, and this was so we went to try to empirically find the number of multidimensional partitions. And it is,
Yes,
well, I should tell something that when you go to high numbers of to 4 or to 5 qualities or symbols into the elements of the set, you obtain sort of a lattice, a big, an enormous lattice of multidimensional partitions that are related by just difference in one symbol or in two symbols. But the funny thing in this, let's say, macro space is that if you throw a little perturbation of just two symbols somewhere, you originate a ripple of losses of redundant elements that go to other corners of the space. Very, I mean, it is very fascinating. I mean, you go to like a physical space where the perturbation percolates everywhere. And a very tiny perturbation can originate an enormous cascade of partitional changes. This was something we could not explore, but nowadays with all the computer new tools, I think it would be interesting because Karl left and explored this realm because he went to the cycles, and we were personally was more interested in the multidimensional partitions because I thought it was a good tool for cell signaling, for the sort of algebra that cells play with the signs of the environment, because they don't count in conventional way. They do something different. I mean, Kate, you can think on many feedbacks connected, and then what do you do with that mess? It is very similar to multidimensional partitions, and this was my interest.
Has somebody some knowledge or reference to this old or ancient Akkadian and Sumerian text linked to this? To this kinds of concepts? Maybe or only Karl was aware of.
Only Karl. But I think we could, if there are people interested, maybe in some future we could arrange something to see whether the space of multidimensional
We
partitions
don't have any experts
as a model or
knowledge on.
something.
Okay.
right.
Pedro?
Yes.
Pedro, did I hear you say Markov space?
Markov
No,
chain.
no, I don't know.
I didn't hear you say that?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't know
No
this space.
change. Karl return us to Sumerian and Akkadians because Akkadians overwhelmed the Sumerian civilization and changed understanding from linear counting to space understanding. The Sumerians think in points, but Akkadians thinks as chains of points. I can show, excuse me, the presentation of, sorry, of I try to present this in more, now I will show you what right, I redraw his letter, which he writes immediately after.
Excuse me, Krasimir. Jorge is telling that he has to close just in 1 or 2 minutes.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Because
This is
2 hours.
Right. This is linear two grouping. You see that grouping, the linear order is not important. This Wu right. And thank you, Wu, for this very interesting letter.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, also for everything. We have here some links to languages, pictogram languages and linear languages as well. So, which is also referred to all these new versions of AI and different disciplines. So, now let's continue this in new talks. Thank you very much, and
Yeah.
I'm very excited about continuation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Bye bye.
you.
Bye bye.